and we are back on Real Talk with Eddy Kara with our current guest, Nikolas. Let's talk about New York. So something surprising happened in New York City, in fact, for the Democrats, right? They held primary races for both the Republican and the Democratic parties, and the former governor of the state, Andrew Cuomo, was poised to win it, right, in the polls, with the exception of a single poll days before election night, showing that Zohran Mamdani had 1 point lead over Andrew Cuomo, okay? And what occurred? It's Zohran Mamdani, who's the assembly member, 33 years old, who won the Democratic primary with 43.5% of the vote compared to Andrew Cuomo's 36.4% on Tuesday night of June 24th. And Andrew Cuomo did concede. And another thing that was really interesting is literally more than 24 hours after that, he announced that he's not going to remove himself from the ballot, and in fact he's going to run as an independent alongside current Mayor Eric Adams and the Republican nominee who's chosen to be Curtis Sliwa. Now, he also announced that as an independent candidate, he's running under the banner of Fight and Deliver Party, which I didn't even know existed till now, right? So what are your thoughts about, first of all, the reasons why the assembly member won instead of Andrew Cuomo? And secondly, what do you think is going to occur during the general election till November?
Yeah, so this was very exciting and huge for the progressive left in the United States, specifically in New York City. So Cuomo, the establishment Democrats needed to put, if they wanted an established Democrat, they needed a stronger candidate than Cuomo. Yes, he was governor, but he did resign in the cloud with some allegations from some of his staff members. Also, the conduct during COVID-19 with the nursing home scandal and all that. So he wasn't the most exciting candidate even for the establishment individuals. So having someone like Mamdani, who went from pretty much unheard of to winning the Democratic primary in New York City in such a short period of time too, is showing the mood. It's a litmus test for the rest of the Democratic Party across the nation. And if you haven't already, you'll start to hear voices within the Democratic Party saying we can win with a progressive left populist policies. And I think there's going to be an internal power struggle or battle over what the overall policy prescription they'll be showing in the midterms. Is it going to be a more establishment package, or is it going to be something that's much more progressive? And if it's progressive, it has the chance to really ignite support at the grassroots level. But for New York City already, we're going to see that Mamdani is going to become a fixture in Democratic politics. He's going to be someone who will have a lot of influence if he's able to win the mayor election. Interesting that Adams and Cuomo are still staying in, so it's going to be a bit interesting there. But with the official mantle as the Democratic Party candidate, he should have a strong chance at winning the general election now.
I don't know if I agree with that, because look, you have two of the more moderate candidates running as independents, right? So they're going to take votes away. And I do believe the primary result was like this because the other Democratic moderate candidate, Brad Lander, did take 11% of the vote. In fact, the reason he didn't get more is because he famously had this publicity stunt rather, where he was arrested for making a scene and protesting to fight for birthright citizenship and immigrant rights given the ICE raids. Mamdani did take a lot of the public exposure away from Brad and Andrew Cuomo the moment when he started being the only one not speaking for Israel. And he also received the endorsements of Bernie Sanders and AOC, whereas Andrew Cuomo received all the other moderate endorsements. Not that endorsements really moved that much of the needle. But I do think it's a problem that Andrew Cuomo stayed in the race, because those moderate Democrats who might not vote for Zohran Mamdani or are not going to vote for Eric Adams, they're going to stick with Andrew Cuomo or vote for Mamdani if it's much more strategic. And let's not forget, in New York State, in the last 2024 general election, the presidential, a lot of people did, like the number of Republican voters increased. It didn't go the opposite way. which was the stunning surprise in terms of demographics in that state alone. The primary issues was, even though it was a lot of focus on Israel as a state and their global wars right now, actually we're focused more on rent and taxes. And, Andrew Cuomo spoke very much similarly to Eric Adams. And Eric Adams did raise taxes and rent by a significant margin as opposed to what he had promised. So Mamdani still does want to increase on the rich, right? But a lot of his opponents are attacking him now with regards to having a policy in place like that will encourage millionaires to leave the city. And he's of the opinion, actually, they did not leave the city following tax increases by Mayor Adams. So do you believe the tax issue is going to stick till the end of the election, till election night? Is that going to be the issue that moves voters to vote?
I think that will definitely, those opposing Mamdani will of course try to stick with it, and they'll do anything to get the messaging on track for that. But with Mamdani's proposals and his policies, a lot of them need the support of the New York State legislature and the governor. For example, like a rent freeze, you can't do that without state government. Fare free buses, that's also the state legislature. Even if he does want to do the taxes on New Yorkers earning over $1 million, that's also the New York tax code, the state tax code. So he needs state buy-in. I'm not sure the general progressive versus moderate makeup of the New York State legislature, and things of course may change in elections to come. So the real struggle for him is more, first it's to get elected, and then once you're elected, then you have to get the buy-in. He has the promises. You don't necessarily need to win based off what you do. It's based off what you promise and what people believe you'll fight for. And he will get votes, I think, for arguing for having an income tax on those who earn over $1 million a year. He may lose votes from some that way, but I think there's a lot more gain for him to get from arguing for that. And then if you're worried about that, is it actually going to happen because it will take state authority to do so? That's another part of it. So you might even have people who are opposed to that who will still vote for him because they don't think it's going to happen, but they support someone who's just generally fighting for that. Other ones that are in the same bucket here are universal childcare and affordable housing generally will also require state authority. I do like the idea of the city-owned grocery stores. That's something he could do with just his mayor authority if he wins. Because we are seeing a lot of bodegas, a lot of supermarkets, a lot of brick and mortar stores in New York City have been closing over in recent years. A lot of it is competition from conglomerates, from online shipping. Part of it is it's hard to make a profit on some of this stuff. Some of it is due to shoplifting, theft, etc. So there's a lot of factors there. But it is an excellent idea to have a city-owned grocery store and to see how that would actually work. Would it just be one in each borough? Will there be more, etc.? And then the Department of Community Safety, that was also an excellent idea because then you're finding a way that to lessen people's fears about crime and the challenges associated with the cost of living right now, but doing so in a way that it's not necessarily increasing police authority. You're doing it more within a neighborhood type of approach, and I think that will also resonate with New Yorkers.
Most recent poll came out actually for the general election. And here are the results. It's conducted by the Honan Strategy Group on June 25th with a sample size of 817 respondents. Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo as independent candidates were being included in the poll, and this is what it shows. Mamdani at 39%, Andrew Cuomo at 39%, Adams at 13%. And the Republican nominee, once again, Curtis Sliwa, at 7%, with only 2% of New Yorkers being undecided. So it's a very tight general election. I feel like a lot of, let's say, the Mayor Bloomberg supporters or the typical Bloomberg voters who are centrist or center-right voters are flocking around Andrew Cuomo just to strategically vote against Mamdani. So I think it's going to be, even though he conceded the Democratic primary, I think Andrew Cuomo knows what he's doing. I personally prefer a breath of fresh air, right, rather than Andrew Cuomo, to be honest. But I do think, look, some people on the left had the same sentiment regarding Mayor Bloomberg, but he did win 3 times. And he ran as an independent as well, apart from being the Republican nominee. So I do think despite the presidency going Republican under Trump, I don't think it's going to be Republican winning, don't get me wrong, but I do think an independent can win again. And that person might be Andrew Cuomo. But I don't think it's going to be Eric Adams, because he's actually a very unpopular mayor, kind of like Mayor Bill de Blasio. in fact. So I think the tolerance for incumbent mayors in major cities like New York City has become much more difficult to gain a higher favorability rating if you're running for a second term. And I think people's patience is much more minimal nowadays. Would you agree?
Yeah, to an extent. So for Mayor Adams, with the whole alleged misconduct involving Turkey, where the Department of Justice was investigating him, and then due to an agreement with the Trump administration, they've sort of dropped them. A lot of people resigned because they didn't want to halt the proceedings because they were very adamant about that. So I wouldn't expect Adams to win, of course, due to all that and the fact that he's not really with an established party anymore. But it does muddy the field, and he will get some supporters because he does have a long history there. Cuomo, his advantage is mainly the name recognition of his family and himself. And of course, there's a lot of millionaire donators, billionaires donators. So Mamdani needs to work on the sort of like the snowball effect that he's currently been successful with. Is now that he won the Democratic primary, his name recognition is going to skyrocket. And he has to keep on that track. A lot of grassroots, see what from the establishment, if there's anyone he can bring over, if it's even possible. And then really focus, I would say, continue his focus on social media. He's very social media savvy. That was a part of what caught the Cuomo team off guard, was just how effective they were on the airwaves, whether it was Instagram, whether it was on TikTok. I think there's a strong chance you're going to see a shift within the Democratic Party towards the progressive left at this time, especially as a foil towards the Trump administration. And they see Adams as potentially an extension of that, because Adams, worried about the potential investigations, was more favorable towards the immigration raids within New York City, towards ICE enforcement. And someone like Mamdani represents what some New Yorkers and some Democratic leaning voters would want, and some independents as well, as someone who can be a force to stand up to the administration over what they see as maybe federal branch overreach into state affairs or until municipal affairs in the city of New York.
One of the things that we're going to notice is a true test of whether or not, well, obviously, of this mayoral race, whether or not we're going to see a Democratic presidency of AOC. So if she is effective with Mamdani's campaign, and as you said, a progressive left having a better win and much more leverage within the Democratic Party, I think it brings us closer to seeing an AOC becoming president the next time around. So that's going to be the big test based on New York City's race. That's been all our topics for today on Real Talk with Eddy Kara. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us. And until next time, folks.